So we've been running since 2007 as a non-profit for the benefit of the arts, comprising of the artist's residency and 30 hectares of sculpture park. Since then, we've had over 400 artists from around the world, from all different disciplines. We work with sculptors, painters, writers, musicians, performance artists, dancers, all different disciplines. They then leave one work behind at the end of their residency. If it is a sculpture, it will likely go out into the park. If not, it'll go into our archive. But it is not the be-all and end-all of what the residency is about. We're way more about the process than the actual outcome. So this work is by the first artist in residence at Nirox, Willem Boshoff. Willem came here in 2007 to recover from lead poisoning. He gave himself lead poisoning through stripping lead-based paint off wooden frames. It's something that's very badly affected him. It's something that your body can't really deal with. All these years later, it still affects him, and he's still in very poor health. He has visited here many times, and on his first visit, he started to walk a little bit more every day. And that's when he discovered that he was a druid, and he began his performance artworks called his druid walks, which he's done in town, in Mabeneng, and then also here. It is the act of noticing very small bits of something interesting or something beautiful out of something that you would normally ignore. In the trees, he was looking particularly for signs of scarring, like this, for example, or some sort of echo of humanity, maybe something that could be an armpit or an earlobe or something. He knows the Latin names of all of the plants around Nirox. He is deeply committed to learning every plant in the world. He has memorized the King James Bible and also the Oxford English Dictionary. So he's got that kind of a brain that just holds all of these words. Of the 5 works in the park of his, only one of them doesn't have a word on it. So this one is called Writing Footprints. It's inspired by these gravel paths and dirt roads, and the impressions that are left by footprints and tire tracks that are then erased by those that come after them, like temporary writing, almost like invisible ink. And Willem would love to be able to write on water, and this is about as close as he's gotten to representing it. The material that is used here is Belfast black granite from Belfast and Mpumalanga, and it is 2 billion years old. 2 billion years ago was also the time of the Vredefort meteor impact, and when this massive rock the size of Table Mountain struck the earth at 7 times the speed of sound, the first thing that it did was liquefy everything that it came in contact with, including this rock, which then over billions of years became solid again. The other similarity with water is the sand-blasted letters. When it rains, or if you pour a little bit of water on it, or let the irrigation system go, the sand-blasted letters sort of recede into the black of the granite as well, so they kind of disappear. The writing in a circle starts over there, and it says, "I haven't a clue as to how my story will end, but that's all right. When you set out on a journey and night covers the road, you don't conclude that the road has vanished. And how else could we discover the stars?" So this here, if you stand here, you can see the sign and the pile of rocks in the distance. This is by Whitney McVeigh. She's a UK-based artist, and it was installed for the Not a Single Story exhibition in 2018 of all female artists, including Yoko Ono and Dr. Esther Mafungu. And this work is called Self-Portrait 18,088 Days. There are 18,088 rocks there, or at least they were when she installed them in 2018. I haven't counted them and I don't plan to. And they do represent the stories that she talks about on the wall, but also each one represents a day of her life leading up to that exhibition opening. She was 18,088 days old when the exhibition opened, which is about 49 point something years. All the stones are sourced from the adjoining nature reserve. So Nirox is 30 hectares, but over the river is 1,000 hectares of private nature reserve, which is owned by Nirox's director, Nirox, and then all of our neighbors. It's about 7 different landowners that about 20 years ago decided to just drop all the fences and create one large nature reserve. And Nirox is the bottom of that base. This mural is by Dr. Esther Maflangu, painted in 2018 for the Not a Single Story exhibition. It was done over 3 days, and she did have some assistance. It was done as part of the workshop. So I think there were another 3 or 4 assistants helping her. Using traditional Ndebele techniques, including the use of a chicken feather in the thinner bits, not the whole thing, because that would be insane. You can also see there are like these perfect imperfections here, which to me shows that she did not use a template or a grid or masking tape to demarcate the lines. You can see wavy lines. Also, you would think this would line up to the center of that. Doesn't. You'd think that would line up to that. That. All these little imperfections which make it way cooler. It wouldn't be impressive if this was just done with a grid and she very famously only uses Plascon PVA paint. She doesn't even call it PVA, she calls it Plascon. And she was also in the news a few years ago because somebody broke into her home in rural Limpopo and stole, amongst other things, her handgun.
Huh?
Her handgun. So you can imagine, I think when she did this, she was 86. So when this happened, she must have been 88, 89. Imagine this little old lady with a gun, you know? So these bronze works here are by Riaz Komu from India, and it's called the Fourth World, like the Third World, but the Fourth World. And the person being portrayed is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was one of the authors of the Indian Constitution. His life's work was to try to do away with the caste system, which unfortunately still exists. And he was a member of the untouchable class, the Dalits. So it's a bronze cast. It is quite literally the same mold cast twice. There's a bit of an illusion that this one is bigger than that one because it's on a bigger plinth, it's on a taller plinth. There's definitely something in that. Also, he's turning his back on himself and reaching out. And then the empty pillars are here to invite visitors to do the same thing, basically. Create a selfie moment. Yeah, it's viewed very much like Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi. Shack is by an artist from Spain. It's called Ikaya, which means home in isiZulu and Isixhosa. It is gold leafed, so definitely it would have been gold leafed in a studio and then brought here and then put together. It does have these lights that light it up at night as well. It's very striking. It's one of my favorite works in the park.
It is quite striking.
The artwork is called Morphic Resonance. The materials used are Belfast black granite, the same 2 billion year old shiny rock, bits of other rock, and rammed earth and concrete, and it's on a steel armature holding the whole thing together. This rock is part of it, and it's also Belfast black granite that's left rough on the one side and polished on this. So the title refers to a theory by Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who is a British scientist and esotericist, a hippie essentially. And in esoteric terms, he was trying to explain the interconnectivity of energy. And these like almost telepathic phenomena that exist, things like phantom limb syndrome, or how your pets might be waiting at the gate for you because they know you're about to come home, or how somebody might be staring at you and you can turn around and catch them. He's done lots of experiments around staring, and then lots of experiments in the animal kingdom, and he's very interested in it. Things like rats that learn a maze in London, and then rats that go through the same maze in New York might find it a little bit easier. But in the animal kingdom, he was particularly interested in instinct. How is instinct transmitted from generation to generation? Because it's not taught. So science will probably say that it's got something to do with DNA and embedding it into that, which is probably the case, but it's also quite boring. Carl Jung had the idea of the collective unconscious, and in Hinduism there's the idea of the Akashic record, the shared record of all human memory. Or does maybe the land itself hold memory? Which is very interesting to think about in the cradle, because this would hold our first human memories. So how you could interpret all of that into the artwork is the way that the rock is polished on this side, the way that there's more of the granite on this side of the figure. So it's like the energy is radiating from the rock to the figure, or from the figure to the rock, really. The placement of the rock is also interesting to me because the obvious place would be here, like in line with his eyes, but his eyes are closed because he doesn't need to be looking at the rock. He is made of the same stuff. It also for me highlights this false notion of man's separateness to nature. Also by the fact that his feet are firmly planted on the ground, his hands are firmly planted, grounded. So Angus installed this in 2014, and he didn't expect it to last as long as it has.
Bolt of lightning from the sky one day.
These are part of Willem Boshoff's Blind Alphabet series, which he began in 1990 and is still ongoing. If you are sighted, you will walk in, you will see "Do not touch," and that's basically where it's going to end. If you're blind, you're not going to see the sign that says "Do not touch." You're going to walk forward, and you'll find the braille on top of the artwork. So I've said before that he loves words. He collects obscure English words, like defenestrate, for example, to throw out the window. And these are representations of those words. So the braille will say what the word is, and it will give basically his justification for wanting to do it this way. And it'll also tell you to take off the lid and to take the object out. And then if you are blind, because what we're doing now is completely illegal, because we can see. If you are blind, then you will find something to do with the word in feeling the shape, along with the braille that you find there. The entire fine art world, or visual art world, is for the sight. There are three amazing forms in here.
And that helps you to speak, helps you to come up with an idea.
I've only got you guys for another half an hour, so we're not going to spend it watching movies, but
These are the actual bones that are thrown, the knuckle bones. They mix them in with other things as well, and then you look at that and you can interpret what you see in that one. The little one's gone by itself. And the second largest one is by itself. This is the biggest one. These are all the big children. So now it starts. Your head starts inventing. You start thinking, what, yes, no, what. So now, superstition is if you take it literal, but divination is if it aids you in and you don't become too literal in your prediction, then it's a prediction, it's not the same thing. And in the Druid in 2000,
This work is by Ayanna V. Jackson. She is an American interdisciplinary artist. She is the photographer as well as the subject. It is self-portrait photography, and it is ceramic ink baked onto glass. She's referencing Sarah Bachman, who was taken over to France from Africa, and she was put on display because she had a differently shaped body. Now, the hypocrisy of that was what was in fashion at the time were these muscles, fake acids. So she was put on display because she had a bigger butt, but ultimately this is what all the French ladies were wearing to recreate that. So Ayanna imagines herself as a lady in waiting, like a maid waiting on a mistress, and she's found the stolen moments where the corset and the bustle, the petticoat, the boots are all available, and she's trying them on for herself. I really like the way, my favorite part of the work is the way they reflect each other as you walk through them.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting point of view. This is north facing, south facing. This is the sun. If you look closely, you'll notice the USA is made of a different material than the rest of the letters. The JERLEM are tar to resemble blown up roads. The backing is rubble to resemble blown up buildings. And the USA is red and rusted metal to resemble shrapnel. This work was installed in 2017. Not after the 7th of October 23. Knowing Willem, it would have started just by noticing the USA in the middle of the word. He has made another work when he was in the US, also highlighting the USA in the middle of the word crusade. So Willem writes so beautifully on his website, and he loves his words, but he didn't give us any of his own words when it comes to this work. He just gave us a quote from the Bible, which maybe makes it a little bit easier for tour guides like myself, because I can just use those words and not have to use my own. And the quote goes, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you that kill the prophets, you that stone those who are sent to you, how I have longed to gather your children together, like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and yet you would not. And yet you would not." The other similarity when he first started working on this work was during Trump's first presidency. He was talking about building a wall between the US and Mexico. This work over here, these little concrete houses, are by a Moroccan artist, Abdurrahim Yamu. It was installed in 2019, and its location was chosen to be in conversation with the Wailing Wall. It is called Settlement. It is referencing that particular settlement, but also this was the first time the artist visited South Africa, so he became aware, just like Ignacio and Ikaya, of the housing issues and poverty issues within South Africa, informal settlements, land redistribution, all these important topics. And it is close to the water because every civilization needs a source of water, but we have this crazy human need for growth, and we gather and we gather and we gather and we gather, and we start to impact our environment. So it is close to the water to show rising water levels and climate change. These ones are called cerebral aspect 110 and 141. So he's referencing Taln Child, which was one of the early hominid fossil discoveries, and pretty much the only one not found in the cradle. It was found with the lower jawbone separated from the skull and half of the brain outside of the skull. So 3 separate segments, but this is a representation of the brain and the skull. Now, you'd think that perspective, knowing that perspective is important to his work, that you would be able to line up the small figure into the negative space of the large figure. You can't. I think he probably would have liked for it to work. This is his stone circle. This is the Druid stone circle. This one was cut in half to resemble an open book with a diamond rope cutter. The type of rock is breccia, which is like a sedimentary rock. Basically, mud flows from the high areas to the low areas and brings a whole bunch of stuff with it, sometimes including bone. And so here in the cradle, this is the kind of rock that you are most likely to find fossils in. That's by Adelheid Frankowitz. It's called Implant. She references the fact that her parents are first-generation Polish immigrants and being extracted from one place and implanted into another. In between the trees there is a wooden work by Serge Elaine Mtageka. You see these sort of angular pieces of wood. So Serge is originally from Rwanda. He is a Rwandan refugee, and all of his work talks about that. That's part of a series called A Structural Response. It was originally installed in the covered space between the doors. So you can move between it, but you're going to have to duck and move around this. You can move between borders, but it's not easy. And it's called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Apartheid's Wishing Well. It's too high. There's no ladder. How do you get to that water? Also, you can't just like take a 10-cent piece, duck it off into the wishing well and wish away apartheid. Most people view the TRC as a really positive thing, you know. But what did it really do for us? This is by Michele Matheson from Zimbabwe, and it's called Ndoro, which in Shona means shell. One of the earliest forms of currency was the cowrie shell or the Kona shell, and Michele wanted to highlight that and also the sacred geometry of the spiral that it contains within it. So to take it out of this commodified commercial space and bring it into the more sacred. Very simple materials, 16 mil rebar that you can buy in a good construction store. Steel base plates. I like the noises. It gets higher and higher and higher as you go towards the center, so you could actually take a stick and so this is, we call this the covered space. We've got 30 hectares of sculpture park, but not so much indoor gallery space. This is one of them. It was built in 2020 at the time that we launched, and then there was fire, which is just next door. It's built with rammed earth, less than 5% concrete, and cheap South African pine. the idea that these walls don't need to last for like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. We have this weird human like obsession with permanence and like concrete structures that are going to be here way longer than us. Why do we do this? Anyway, so what we're looking at the moment, two works, one by Eduardo Villa and one by Jackson Hlongwane, as part of the Villa Plus exhibition. So Eduardo Villa came to South Africa as a prisoner of war. He was conscripted into Mussolini's army and was fighting in Egypt in the Second World War. He was wounded and captured by South African soldiers, and he was brought to Zonderwater prison just outside of Pretoria, where he spent 5 years as a prisoner of war. When he was released, he decided not to go back to Italy, but rather to stay here. And here was where he created all of his work, really. And we would probably have to acknowledge him from the late 50s, from at least the late 50s to, let's say, mid-80s as South Africa's leading sculptor, if not one of them. Before he passed on, because he didn't have any inheritors, he created the Claire and Eduardo Villa World Trust. So essentially the fortune that he'd made through the sale of his work, he was a very, very successful sculptor, was then invested in the dividends of which are made available to support African sculpture on a yearly basis, in theory in perpetuity, because they're only touching the dividends and not the original investment. One of the recipients of the Villa Award for Extraordinary Sculpture is Jackson Hlongwane, who received it posthumously. The funds were then used to publish a book, a career-long retrospective on his work. Jackson Hlongwane was a very religious man. He founded his own church in Limpopo. This work is called Champion Man, but it echoes another one of his famous works called Christ Playing Football. So you can see the arms up, but then also the foot out as he's scoring a goal. Soccer is like a religion in this country. Yeah. Another reason that they're exhibited together is to show sort of the influence of South African sculptors on Eduardo Villa throughout his career, which is 50 years. You can see the influence of sculptors like Ezra Matthias, Nkamalo, Jackson Hlongwane on some of his work. Yeah.